invitation to. That's me confirming I'm recording. So yes, thank you very much for the invitation to speak to you. It's been a fascinating series of talks you've been holding, and from my end, I over the last 2 years, I've ended up doing quite a lot of Zoom talks from here in the comforts of my garage. So it's after a few months of being back out in the wild giving face-to-face talks, it feels quite retro to be back in the garage again to talk to you. But it's a great opportunity to talk to you about the Prestonpans Tapestry, which some members of the association I know have seen, and hopefully all of you at some point will get a chance to see. And the purpose of what I'm going to talk about, as you heard in the introduction there, is to run through its past, its present, and its future. The most exciting bits, as is always the case, and a historian would say this, of course, are the past bits, perhaps. So I wanted to start there with the beginnings of the Prestonpans Tapestry. How on earth this monstrously long 105-meter embroidery came to be. Now, the story that is encapsulated in the tapestry is familiar to all of you, I know. It's the story of the opening phases of the 45. It has a brief opening shot in Rome. Then the action moves to France and to Brittany, and then really things get going with the prince's arrival on Ereskay. And the story of the tapestry follows both Prince Charlie's progress through to Glenfinnan and beyond, and the progress of Sir John Cope and his opposing forces on this first campaign, leading up to the battle that was fought at Prestonpans on the 20th and 21st of September 1745. The tapestry goes on to tell the immediate aftermath of the battle, up to the point of the prince and his army's departure from Edinburgh on the 1st of November 1745, and that's where it stops, with a sort of ... what happens next ending. Of course, we all know what happens next, but imagine the size of a tapestry that followed the story from the 1st of November all the way through to the following year. But more to the point, the mission of the Prestonpans Heritage Trust at the time the tapestry was created was to try and shift the balance in the way that the history of the 45 was told in Scotland, particularly, which tended to read the book from the back, in that there was a lot of public consciousness and understanding and attention on Culloden, and there was less, perhaps, focus on the earlier part of the conflict. And if you don't understand where it all starts, of course, it's a struggle to make a sense of how it all comes to end. And the feelings of the Jacobite soldiers particularly were very different when they were standing on the battlefield at Prestonpans on the 21st of September after their victory there. And you get a very different perception of what this campaign meant to those men involved if you focus on that point in time without knowing the end point. So those are some of the reasons why the tapestry is limited in its scope to this opening phase of the conflict up to the immediate aftermath of Prestonpans. The battle itself, I'm sure, is familiar to you. If it isn't, then you have to come and see us at Prestonpans, and I'll be only too pleased to fill in the blanks for you. But as you know, the army of Prince Charles, untested, very small still, only 2,500 men, on the very early morning of the 21st of September, after a day of manoeuvres and skirmishing, faced down the professionals of Lieutenant General Sir John Cope, and in a very short, sharp, very bloody encounter, managed to rout that army and effectively destroy it, taking large numbers of prisoners, both men and material, captured. And it's the success at Prestonpans that facilitates the process whereby the army can expand, double in size, resource itself for the expedition into England that follows. So a very, very significant moment in the story. And had Prince Charlie and his forces been defeated at Prestonpans, it would probably be very much a case of Bonnie Prince who, and there probably wouldn't be a 1745 association talking about this very minor, insignificant insurrection that had happened over the course of just a few weeks during the course of the War of the Austrian Succession. So it really is a moment where the stakes are raised and the situation changes dramatically from here on. So it's a story that, as I'm hoping you would all agree, was very much worth telling. The Battle of Prestonpans Heritage Trust was set up in 2006, largely through the work of Gordon Preston Grange, who's with us, and the battle had been very commonly portrayed in artworks, and novels, and poetry, song through the late 18th and 19th centuries. But as the town had become very heavily focused on industry in the 20th century, it had not exactly developed as a tourism hotspot to the battlefield at Prestonpans. However, it was pretty well served by monuments. It had a monument on it before Culloden Battlefield did, and it, in the 1960s, got a large viewpoint pyramid sculpted out of an old coal bin, from which Bonnie Prince Charlie's battle flag now flies, as you can see here. I say that, it doesn't quite fly now because it has been taken down during the succession of storms that we've had recently, and it's on my job list to put it back up now that things hopefully are improving, touch wood. But the purpose of the Battle of Prestonpans Heritage Trust was to look at ways to not only tell the story of the battle that had happened here, but also engage the community in that story, and to use the battlefield and the heritage and the fame of Prince Charlie and his supporters as a means of regenerating the community and bringing in new opportunities and a new sense of community pride, perhaps too, as well. So there are lots of motivations bound up in the creation of the trust, and it happened at a time when there were other art projects happening, a murals trail developing, an arts festival, and so there was very much an artistic community arts focus in what was happening in and around Prestonpans during the early part of the 21st century. The Trust, of course, did the sorts of things that you would expect of it as well. We got a lottery grant that allowed us to commission archaeological surveys of the battlefield, and we did a lot of work on trying to understand how to place the battlefield into the landscape today. Even as this image itself tells you, it's a battlefield that's had interventions in it. There are pylons, there are railway lines, there are roads, but nevertheless, the core area of the battle remains identifiable and accessible. We also put in an interpretation trail, which over the years has expanded. New monuments have been added as well, and an app to bring it all together that you can freely download onto your phone. And we've been doing lots of tours and schools work, all the sorts of things you would expect a battlefield heritage group to be doing. And then everything suddenly changed, and our focus suddenly shifted to this rather different looking battlefield. And if you're a battlefield connoisseur, you perhaps recognize it as Hastings. And the reason that our eyes shifted to Hastings is simply because Gordon Preston Grange went on a holiday. And with all of this stuff in mind as to what are we going to do next, what is the next way that we're going to be able to tell this story, Gordon went, like anybody who's passing through Bayeux in Normandy, to see the Bayeux Tapestry. And Gordon came back from the tapestry sensing that there was something in this. He saw a story about a claimant to the throne coming from overseas, fighting a decisive battle and going on to glory, which has some echoes in the story of the early phase, at least, of the 45 campaign. And Gordon started to suggest that perhaps this was something that could be turned into a collaborative arts project in Prestonpans, to take the way that the story was told in this sort of comic strip format and adopt that for the story of 1745. And for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure how, we all said yes. And in Prestonpans, we commissioned a locally based artist who'd worked with Gordon on the Murals Trail and the arts festivals, Andrew Crummy, who's standing in the top right image there, to start thinking about how we could not only design a tapestry that told the story, but also one that was simple enough to encourage all sorts of different people to take part in the creation of it. And as you can see from that very early image there from the sample that was made when we started asking people to get involved in the project, the original intention was for the comic strip design to be very, very simple, and for the embroidery to be very simple, to encourage participation. This was not a project that was focused on what the end product was going to be. It was a project about getting people together to talk about the story and to put the narrative of what happened onto linen. Now, we went up, that's a much more youthful looking me at Borrowdale House. The group of the trustees and Steve as well came up to Borrowdale House in 2009 to start spreading the word that the tapestry project was underway. We needed to recruit embroiderers who were willing to volunteer to take part in this project, and we'd already determined that we wanted the tapestry to tell the story of the campaign that led up to Prince Charlie. So obviously we took our inspiration from the Prince. We went to Borrowdale House just as he'd done and started our campaign there. It was a battle bus, a converted mobile library that we used as a temporary exhibition that we drove up to Borrowdale. Steve took us around to lots of the locations that he knew so well from his book, of course, and we were literally knocked on doors and asked people, Bonnie Prince Charlie came through here, he went past your house, or he stayed at your house, or his friends stayed at your house. We're going to create this tapestry. Would you like to stitch the bit of him coming through here? And quite amazingly, people were saying yes. Not only were they saying yes, but they were saying yes far more enthusiastically, vigorously, and than we had anticipated, to the extent that this tapestry was in danger of growing. In terms of scale, we'd intended the tapestry to be about 79 meters long, which was very ambitious, we thought, but it meant it was 1 meter longer than the Bayeux tapestry, so that even if ultimately it was fairly rubbish, it would probably still be able to grab a few headlines. The reality, though, was that people were so keen to take part in it that the panels started to expand. The idea had been that each individual image, each panel, would be 1 meter long and half a meter deep, that half meter being the measurement of the Bayeux tapestry too. And it would essentially therefore be 79 individual illustrations that could be sent off to the volunteers. As people started to come forward, though, they started to say things like, well, of course, Bonnie Prince Charlie's army also passed through my village, and you haven't included that. Of course, then a group would come forward and say, well, you've not included the Jacobite army's visit to Dunblane. I've got a good group of stitchers, we'll do you a lovely panel, but you'd better add it in. And slowly but surely, this 79 meters grew and grew until eventually it reached the 105 that I mentioned earlier. And there is Borrowdale House as depicted in the tapestry itself, looking as close as we could get from talking to one of our trustees, who was an architect and specializes in historic building renovations. And he thought this was a fairly good impression of what Borrowdale looked like in 45. Obviously, it was, as you know, burned down after the campaign in 46. And so this is really how it got started. Andrew Crummy started doing the design work. Myself and the American historian Martin Margulies gave historical advice as we divided it up into the 79 scenes, growing to 105. Andrew would sketch out the scenes in full scale on paper. Then these would be adapted and changed and altered as more people put in input, whether about historical details or simply about the sorts of local stories that the stitchers themselves wanted to include in it. And eventually these would be drawn up into full-scale images like the one that you can see there on the table, and the stitchers would then receive a linen panel which had the outline of those images traced on in pencil, hand traced over light boxes, and then they were simply told to get cracking, and they were to get stitching. And the whole project was designed to happen in less than 18 months from beginning to end, because it's one of those things that if you don't put a tight timetable on it, then like one of my talks, it can go on and on forever. So it did have to be restricted to that nice tight time frame to encourage people to crack on with it. Ultimately, we had about 250 people working on the tapestry right across the country, and lots of people did it for different reasons. Some, as I've mentioned, because they were depicting places that were where they lived, part of their community, sometimes even their own homes. Other people chose to do so because they were embroiderers and wanted to contribute to something on a large scale. Some were interested in the history and the heritage. Some did it for very personal reasons, because there were locations in here that meant something to them, or the process of working with their with family members or with old friends in the collaboration of creating the panels was a meaningful process for them. So lots of different reasons why people got involved with the stitching. Andrew opened his studio up on a weekly basis for people to come in and stitch and chat and learn from each other. Obviously, for those that were based in the Highlands, or the very few panels that were done even overseas, it was a bit more difficult. And perhaps these days we'd have had a Zoom stitching session, but instead we encouraged groups to get together with people that were in their local area, and periodically, if we could, we'd drop in to see how things were getting on. I remember a great visit up to Fort William to talk to some of the stitchers up there, that ended up in us visiting Achnacarry and talking to Cameron of Lochiel to check that he was happy with the way that his ancestor was being depicted in the story. So there was this great sense amongst the stitchers that were working on the tapestry that they wanted to do justice to the story, they wanted to do justice to the locations, and they wanted to get it right. And that process built a very strong sense of ownership between the participants and the tapestry panels themselves. Just to show you that, again, another image from Andrew's studio. There's the light box with the original paper design on it, and the stitched panel coming together above. And you can see, as I mentioned, there's a process of change and evolution in the designs. This is the first design drawing of the Prince's visit to Pinkie House immediately after the Battle of Prestonpans in Musselburgh. And there's the finished panel underneath. So you see elements of the design have changed, but you can also see how the individual stitcher has interpreted the design there on that that beard in the Highlander tucked away behind there. And there are all sorts of little details that please me in here that might not necessarily be noticed by anybody else. These jackets, this distinctive lacing pattern here on this green jacket, I recognize that from a reenactor that regularly attends the Battle of Prestonpans reenactments, and so I can see where some of the influences in some of the images originally came from. I can start to pick out almost people that I know in parts of the Prestonpans Tapestry. Another example there, comparing the original illustration at the top to the finished piece. There's, of course, the opening battle of Prince Charlie's campaign, the sea battle, as the Détail managed to slip its way through the blockades and up to Scotland in the first place. I mentioned in the sort of introductory paragraph that the tapestry can be considered as a fairly comprehensive narrative of what happened in 1745. Obviously, you can't say everything in a linear embroidery, but nevertheless, this is one of the examples that I pull out to try and tell you, to exemplify just how much detail is smuggled into the tapestry, even in places where you don't notice it. This is Blair Castle, and the design for the castle was all drawn up by Andrew in discussions with the group from Clandonachie that actually stitched it, one of whom was an archivist at Blair Castle, and they were determined to show the castle as it genuinely appeared in 45, including the unfinished wing that you see there. So, you know, an attempt to get the architectural details right, for example. But then also look at that top margin, following the pattern of the Bayeux, which has all sorts of interesting things happening in and around the margins. We get there the envelope and the quill, signifying the fact that Prince Charlie receives his first correspondence from Lord George Murray whilst he's at Blair. So it's a small detail in terms of the grand scheme of the narrative, but a significant one, as we know, and so it sneaks its way in. So too does this mysterious hand at the bottom of the panel rolling these balls, and that's a reference to the fact that the prince visited the bowling green at Blair. I've put the quote up there for you, that while the prince was at Blair, he went into the garden and, taking a walk upon the bowling green, he said he had never seen a bowling green before. And there you go. That very small, militarily, politically insignificant moment in the story is nevertheless was significant enough for the people who were working on the panel to ensure that they insisted that Andrew made sure it was included in the designs. And that's not quite enough either. Over there, you will notice hiding behind Lady Lude is a pineapple, because as referenced here in Thomas Bissett's letter, I thought there had been pineapples in Italy, but it seems not, for we happened this day to get up one from Dunkeld, whereof the young gentleman, that's Charles Edward, of course, did eat, and said that it was the first he had ever seen. And so Prince Charlie's first pineapple, which is naturally a significant moment in the campaign, has to be included in the narrative of the tapestry, even just as a very small detail. So I think it is defensible to say that this is a pretty comprehensive telling of the events of the campaign, the big ones, the small ones, the local ones, the anecdotal ones, the ones that perhaps make it all seem a little bit more human sometimes. Not only that, but talking about humans, look at this image of the routing redcoat soldiers towards the end of the Battle of Prestonpans, and amongst those fleeing down at the bottom, your good eyes might be able to spot there's Bill McCabe, the plumber from Prestonpans, whose wife stitched the panel, but he was determined to contribute a little bit, and so he stitched himself into the tapestry, pursuing redcoats with his plunger. So there are lots of details like this, and I can do an entire presentation just about these little secret details and moments within the tapestry, ice creams and all sorts that crop up in there, that are stories relevant to the stitches themselves or to the historical narrative, the things that keep you looking, and you can keep looking and keep finding new things. So that's the sort of making of the tapestry and what it actually is. And as I say, it ended up being 105 meters. And I was given by the trust the task of organizing a sort of whistle stop touring exhibition for it back in 2010 when it was completed. And the brief, which I would never have accepted these days, was that I was to take the tapestry on the route as close as I could of the campaign, and ideally be in locations for the anniversaries of when the armies were there. Now that's quite a challenge. As you know, the Jacobite army particularly moved very fast in the first weeks of the campaign. So we took the tapestry off in this white van, which was very kindly set up with special racking systems inside for the tapestry by Roddy Tulloch, who many of you will know from the Falkirk Heritage Trust, and the van went up into the Highlands, off to Eriskay first, because of course that's where the story really begins. And the picture there inset is in the village hall in Eriskay, where the locals put on quite a party to welcome it. The school children, I think the whole school, turned out for a performance where they did the Battle of Prestonpans through interpretive dance. The Highlanders Highland dancing, of course, whilst the Redcoats line danced to keep in formation. It was quite a thing to behold. I've never seen anything quite like it before or since. But a great celebration, and an important one, because from my point of view, those school children, when talking about the Jacobites that year, were talking about it from the end of the story about Prestonpans and that part of the tale, rather than the Prince and the Heather and the end of the story. And so it was potentially working in terms of shifting people's focus and getting them talking about different aspects and different perceptions of the campaign. The exhibition tour moved very quickly. Some of the exhibitions were just 1 or 2 days. We moved through the country with alarming speed, and we ended up down in East Lothian in time for the battle anniversary. And by the time we reached this village in East Lothian, which is Gullen, we were getting quite good turnouts for exhibitions. You can see the tapestry was quite challenging to squeeze into small village and church halls, but we came up with all sorts of ways of planning to do it. It doesn't matter how many times we've put it up. I don't think we've ever put it up in the same way twice. And we got about 250 into this village hall, 250 people into this village hall for a single day exhibition before moving on to Prestonpans, all of which was racking up. We started to realize that actually more people were coming to see this than just those who were interested in the Jacobites, than just those who were the friends and family of the people who'd worked on it, and that actually maybe, without realizing it fully, we'd created something really quite significant. What we hadn't done yet is really start thinking about what on earth we were going to do with it long term. For a start, would it achieve the same numbers of visitors if we continued exhibiting it after the excitement of the first year, for example? And so after the first touring program, we moved it into the surroundings of St Mary's Episcopal Cathedral in the West End of Edinburgh for a special exhibition. You can see it there along the nave, the side aisle of the nave, looking rather spectacular in this setting. I should say we took this before we let the public in. It wasn't that nobody came. But we don't build churches big enough, obviously, because we still, even in one of the biggest churches in Scotland, had to double bank the tapestry to fit it all in. And what we started to do was not only exhibit the tapestry, but accompany it with talks and presentations and storytelling days and schools workshops and activity trails for youngsters, small reenactment events and so on, all to keep the sort of a sense that this was a story of real people, a living tableau that could be recreated in all of the communities that it went to. And so we continued to tour the tapestry in the years after 2010 when it was completed. And perhaps the high point of its touring life was when, and there's Gordon Preston Grange in the tricorn in the centre there, and this was at the Bayeux Tapestry Museum in Normandy, where the Battle of Prestonpans went to be exhibited alongside, or rather above, the floor above its original inspiration, the Bayeux Tapestry. So we saw this being allowed to exhibit in the Bayeux Tapestry Museum as something of a sort of gold seal of approval, although I like to point out, as shown in the picture on the right, we had to triple bank hours in their exhibition gallery because it was so much bigger than theirs. But the remarkable thing about the tapestry was not just the sort of naive charm of the way that the story is depicted, all of the wonderful details that are in it, the great colors of the stitching, but also the way that people engage with it. They can spend hours going through the Prestonpans tapestry. People were coming to exhibitions and then coming back again the next day or the next week, and they were just immersing themselves in the embroidery, yes, but also in the story. And we realized that we had an obligation, I think, long term, to ensure that it found a permanent home, and that it would be not only displayed but also protected for future generations too. And so we started to develop plans for doing exactly that. The other thing that was happening not long after the tapestry had been finished was that it started to spawn children. The one that affected us most at Prestonpans was the Scottish Diaspora Tapestry, which was largely born out of the fact that we'd assembled a lot of energy and a lot of people around the project at Prestonpans who wanted something to do afterwards. And so for the homecoming that came in 2014, we decided that we would create another large-scale embroidery, this time telling the stories of Scottish communities all around the world, and communities around the diaspora contributed stories. And in a similar way to the Prestonpans Tapestry, we tried to curate it as little as possible and accommodate all the stories that were coming in. And that meant that we ended up going way beyond the 125 panels we'd originally planned for that, and it reached 305, which is where we've finally drawn the line with the Scottish Diaspora Tapestry, which is also managed by the Battle of Prestonpans Heritage Trust. There's some Jacobite stories in there, of course, as you'd expect, but also the Great Tapestry of Scotland and a whole host of other tapestries, and I'm sure there are others that I've missed here as well, were all sort of spawned and inspired by the fact that this project had been so successful. There had been no large-scale narrative embroidery project happening in Scotland before 2010, but the success of the Prestonpans Tapestry and the way that people and audiences were engaging with it has clearly inspired other similar projects, which gives the tapestry a significance in terms of art history, I think, that again oblige us to look for some sort of permanent solution for its residents. Now, all of this brings us towards the year 2020, when the Trust was excited about the opportunities of the 275th anniversary of the battle, like so many of us were, and we had a National Lottery Heritage Fund project to do that. And the idea that the Trust had was that we were going to have lottery support for 2 years of activities, which would help us build our audiences, build our profile, celebrate the 10th anniversary of the tapestry that was coming up in 2020 as well, of course, and all of that would create momentum towards aiming for the creation of a permanent home. And as you can imagine, 105 meters of embroidery requires a sort of purpose-built building, essentially. However, as we all know, the pandemic strikes, and not even Jacobites are immune to the not just to the pandemic itself, but all the restrictions that it brought with it. And so we had to put a lot of our programs online. The plans started to change, and during that, we had a plan for a family activity day about the history of the battle for Prestonpans Town Hall, which we weren't allowed to put on because the hall had been mothballed by the local authority. Not only that, but they wouldn't even let us in to use it as a broadcasting base for doing live streaming or for streaming presentations and talks and things like that, all of which we were trying to do to keep our activities ongoing during the pandemic. And this really focused to the Trust that we were suffering from the lack of a permanent facility. And so we decided to ask East Lothian Council if they would allow us to take a lease on the mothballed town hall in Prestonpans that would allow us to have a base for our activities and allow us to show parts of the tapestry whilst we were raising the funds and the plans towards a long-term permanent world-class visitor attraction on the edge of the battlefield. And amazingly, because there was very little else that the council knew to do with the town hall at Prestonpans, they did consent to this. And in the middle of last summer, the Trust took on the lease for this 125-year-old building. It didn't look very inspiring when we first moved in, but we managed to strip away most of the impacts of the 1960s, 70s and 80s. And we have been slowly renovating the building during the course of the summer and winter. And as you can just hopefully see from the transition here, it has been improving rather considerably as the building is turned into the Battle of Prestonpans Museum, for which we have a 5-year operating lease. Johnny Cope and the Prince there above the stage in the hall. In fact, the Prince himself has moved into residence and is presiding over the final stages of the renovations. For those of you who are familiar with him, this is in fact the mannequin of Prince Charlie, which used to be in the Bonnie Prince Charlie room in Derby Museum. The Prince has returned to Scotland and taken up residence in Prestonpans, courtesy of the staff at Derby Museum. He's been refurbished and redressed, but nevertheless, he is one and the same. I'm very pleased to say that the project for creating the museum exhibition at Prestonpans has been progressing pretty much on schedule. And we are due to open the museum on the 30th of April this year. So not long to go before the doors open. It will initially be open on weekends and available during the week for group visits, school visits, and so on by arrangement. As part of the display in the town hall, there will always be at least 10 meters of the Prestonpans Tapestry. The hall itself isn't big enough to take the whole 105 meters in one go in any meaningful sense that you'd be able to enjoy it alongside the rest of the interpretation we're putting in there. So what we're going to do is we are going to change the panels on a regular basis so that every 6 months the story moves on. And we'll interpret that stage of the story alongside the display of the tapestry. So we'll be starting, of course, with the initial 10 meters that set the scene from the Prince's departure from the Palazzo del Re to his arrival on the shores of Borrowdale. So this is pretty much the conclusion of the present bit of the story, because, as I say, the Prestonpans Tapestry will now be displayed in part, at least at all times, at the new museum on the High Street of Prestonpans. But the future bit, which I have to move through very, very quickly, is simply the fact that we remain committed to establishing a world-class facility that will exist on the edge of the battlefield. We have a site earmarked for it, and we're in discussions with the developers there to create a landmark building that would interpret the story of the battle, that would contextualize it in the wider Jacobite story as well, and would house the entirety of the Prestonpans Tapestry in a single gallery, which, for those of you who've seen it in some of the community venues, perhaps along the way, will be quite a remarkable thing to see. That will incorporate with it all of the lessons that we've learned over the last 10 years or so in terms of how the exhibition and the display of the tapestry isn't a static one. It's about programming and activity and life and people and music and poetry and performance and reenactment and all of the other things that go with it, that will make a very dynamic exhibition in a very dynamic setting that would be very different to, for example, a visit to Culloden battlefield, where the focus is naturally very different and the experience very different too. So those are the ambitions which remain very live. They are actively being pursued by the trustees, and I'm sure that during the coming months and years, you'll be hearing much, much more about that side of the future project. But in the short term, I hope that you'll be hearing lots and lots about the new museum at Prestonpans, and hopefully you'll be coming along to see it very soon. Thank you.